Well, welcome to Christ and Culture. This is Pastor Jeff Short. We cover cultural issues every week from a biblical perspective, and today I'm going to be basically talking about a book that I picked up in the bookstore about 2 months ago. I began to read, and it's got the title of Who Was Adam? And it explores the issue of who was the biblical Adam, and where does the biblical Adam fit in with all of the fossil records and all of the early humans in the history of humanity? Where does Adam fit in with the scientific evidence? Where does Adam interact with natural history? And exploring all the questions about the human race from a Christian perspective. Now, the reason I picked up this book was because one of the co-authors is Dr. Hugh Ross, and I've read probably 2 or 3 of his books. I have his original book. I believe it's called Reasons to Believe or something along those lines, and it was a book that basically takes the approach that the Bible and science are compatible if they're rightly understood. And so he tries to explain how everything is perfectly situated in our planet Earth and around our solar system and in our universe for life on Earth. And that happened because of God's providential care and his direct intervention to make sure that everything worked exactly the way we need it to work for human life on the planet Earth, and that's the will of God. And so I was drawn to Dr. Hugh Ross as a possible understanding of how the Bible and science go together. Of course, there are other different books and authors and researchers and thinkers that have weighed in on the whole subject of the history of humanity. And some of them come at from different perspectives. In Christianity right now, if you don't know, if you haven't studied the topic, there are a handful of different perspectives on how we're supposed to look at the early chapters of Genesis. For example, the days of creation. A popular view, probably the historical, more traditional view, and the most common sense view is that you have someone like a Ken Ham, Answers in Genesis, who basically says that the 6 days of creation are supposed to be taken literally, 24-hour days, just like a regular day, and that God created animals and human beings and plants before that, and everything that we see in literally 6 days. And so we have to take it and understand it that way. That's a possibility because God is omnipotent, God is vast, he's wise, he can do anything he wants. The question arises in the Old Testament, is there anything too big for God? No, there isn't anything too big for God. There's nothing too hard for God. He can do anything he wants. He is God. He can create everything in one day if he wanted to do it that way. The Bible teaches that he created it in 6 days, not one day. But he certainly could have created everything totally formed, totally intact, with a snap of the finger, one-day creation. But he didn't do that. He created everything in 6 days. Now, the controversy in the Christian camp is, what are we to do with those 6 days? Are those 6 literal 24-hour days, or are those 6-day age where each day represents a different specific age in the history of our universe? In other words, can the days mean long periods of time? And that is a very popular Christian understanding, to understand what the days would actually signify, and that more cooperates and harmonizes with science as we know it right now. as far as the age of the universe, as far as the age of the earth, age of the sun, all of these other things. So that's a way that some people in Christianity are able to understand Genesis and not throw out pretty much all of modern science. And that is the approach that Hugh Ross takes. And so I've always been fascinated with that. I've always been fascinated in how do you harmonize the Bible and science, or are they harmonizable, you might say? Or are we to simply just read the Bible and say, I don't know, we can't harmonize it with science? Now, that isn't an option. We, for example, in the Christian world, we don't necessarily have to harmonize what we believe in the Bible with modern science. We don't have to harmonize it with any field of study, for that matter, because if we take the Bible as the Word of God and we take God as the authority, and He has revealed things to us, He has revealed truth to us in the Bible, then why should science be the standard from which we base and judge everything else? No, it shouldn't be. The Word of God, the Bible, properly interpreted and correctly applied, is the standard, not some scientific community that thinks it knows what's going on in this area or that area. And so we are not obligated to harmonize the Bible with anything in science, but it's interesting to see if you were to harmonize the science and the Bible, what would that model look like? And Hugh Ross has co-authored a book with a man named Fuzz Rana, who is a scientist, a chemical doctor of chemistry, I believe it is. Let's see. Yes. He's got a PhD in chemistry. So Dr. Hugh Ross and Fuzz Rana have written a book called Who Was Adam? And this book is not a new book. It is about over 15 years old right now. So it's got information that may be a little bit out of date. But what they do is try to understand the history of humanity in respect to the long ages that we see in the scientific fossil record and so forth. Now, this book comes at it from like I said before, a day-age theory of origins, where the days represent the 6 days of creation, represent 6 ages or epochs in the history of the universe. It does not accept the theory of evolution, which most Christians do not. It does not accept the common ancestry theory that evolution teaches, where we are actually all related to chimps through some common ancestor far back a million years ago or so. It does not accept that. It's what, and I'll explain later what it actually does believe. This book is not a newer book, but there is a newer book out by the apologist William Lane Craig, and he picks up the same question, the quest for the historical Adam, I believe it's called. And he does, unfortunately, he does embrace the full-blown Darwinian theory of evolution and says that at a certain point in the history of evolution of the hominids, that God supernaturally infused two hominids, Adam and Eve, with the image of God, and that's how you explain it. And so he embraces the whole theory of evolution, which causes all kinds of problems with the biblical model. So I don't see how William Lane Craig's view can actually be compatible with the book of Genesis, because he basically says that the first 1 through 11 chapters contain stories that didn't actually happen, but they're supposed to be symbolic. Well, if you're going to go that far, you're probably not going to be classified as evangelical in the sense that we've known the word Bible-believing evangelical, because Bible-believing evangelicals don't believe that the book of Genesis, the first 11 chapters, are primarily myths and legends, just like some of the other pagan religions. No, we believe that this is revelation from God, and it is giving us historical information that we have to take seriously. So Hugh Ross and Fuzz Rana actually take the book of Genesis as historical fact, which I believe all Christians should, and do not see it as myth. And I believe that this model here, the Hugh Ross model, is a little more biblical, a lot more biblical, and as well as also the Ken Ham Answers in Genesis is definitely biblical because it's taking the account literally. Now, we'll look at this Hugh Ross book and review some of the conclusions of it. And it's very interesting because, like I said before, they're trying to grapple with the scientific evidence. Now, if you're in the young earth creationist camp, if you believe in the 6 literal days, and you're going to say that the human race is only maybe 6,000 to 10,000 years old, you're basically rejecting all of the scientific evidence, all of the fossil evidence, and you're basically left without any kind of explanation as to how these ancient creatures walking upright fit into the whole scheme of Earth's history. You basically have to reject almost all of modern science. And again, you can do that. And again, we live our lives according to the Bible, and we don't live our lives according to the scientists' latest theory, because that's changing. And this whole field of human origins is a fast-changing field. There's no question about it. And the problem with even the modern scientists, the mainstream modern scientists, is that they're constantly reclassifying some creature as either non-human or human, and there's always a debate going on as to where the line is. So it's an ever-changing field, and no one has all the answers, so we definitely don't want to pin our entire hope and understanding of human origins on these ever-changing theories and debates in the scientific community. But if you were to accept the scientific timelines and sort of the time frames, we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of years beyond the young earth creationist 10,000-year-old human model. And so you're going to have to come to grips with some of these issues. Now, what Hugh Ross does and Fuzz Rana is they've come up with a model that they think explains best how you can have the scientific evidence and data, and you can also understand the Bible. And it's pretty interesting what they've come up with. Let me read some of the conclusions that they say, and then let's talk a little bit about it, because again, I'm intrigued with this. I think all Christians should be curious and interested. Again, we don't have to solve all the problems. It is possible as Christians, we can simply say, we don't know. If someone says, well, what about the Neanderthal man? Where does he fit into the biblical timeline that's mentioned in Genesis and some of the other books of the Bible? And of course, we don't have to have a ready explanation. We don't have to have even an inkling of what the Neanderthal fossils mean. We can just say, I don't know. I don't see how that fits in, and I don't know how it fits in. And we shouldn't feel ashamed that we don't know something. Scientists, the best scientists, are those who can actually say, well, we simply don't know. And I think the lower level scientists, or even the hack scientists, if you want to say that, are the ones that always seem to want to have to come up with the answer and be the one with the answers. But the real mature scientists, they're not afraid of saying, I just don't know. And so as Christians, we need to be mindful of the fact that saying, I don't know, I don't know where that fits in, or where do all of these fossils fit in of human civilizations 100,000 years ago? Where does that fit in? And we can simply say, I don't know. Nobody has explained it to me adequately enough, or I've never heard a theory that explains everything. So, but if you were to try to tackle that question, where does Adam fit in, the original man that God created, described in Genesis, where does he fit into the history of origins from a scientific perspective? Then these guys, Fuzz Rana and Hugh Ross, try to come up with a model, and it seems to be a pretty good model. Not perfect, but seems to be one of the better candidates that Christians should consider. Let's look at some of their points that they make in this book. The first point is humanity traces back to one woman, Eve, and one man, Noah. And that's important because there are some Christians who have fully embraced the scientific mainstream evolutionary theory and say, well, Adam and Eve, that's just symbolic of man, because Adam, the word Adam in Hebrew, means mankind. So the whole account of Adam and Eve is simply an account of symbolic community that existed. And so it wasn't a one man and a one woman. It was a community of, some scientists have speculated, 10,000 people who composed of early humans. So that, I think that's dangerous, because now you're removing Adam and Eve from a historical man and a woman, and you're making them into some kind of symbol of a community. And that, the Bible doesn't seem to teach that. It seems to teach exactly what Hugh Ross is saying here. Humanity traces back to one woman, Eve, and one man, Noah. And he'll explain why Noah is the one where males trace back their lineage because of the ark. And he talks about the human bottleneck, where if you're going to look at the DNA, you're going to find that males trace back to Noah because of Noah and his sons. They're all related. There's one main DNA, but Eve, she actually, women can trace their DNA all the way back to the first original woman, because on the ark, Shem, Japheth, and Ham, they had wives, and they weren't all related in the same family. So their gene pool will open up a lot more depth than the Noah and sons gene pool. But that's kind of a technical thing. We'll get to that later. Number two, humanity's early population size was relatively small. So he's trying to say we don't buy into that theory where there was this 10,000 or more people community. Number three, humanity originated in a single location in or near the Middle East. Well, that is totally what the Bible teaches, and they're going to point to scientific evidence to show that that is the region of the world where the genetics point to that humanity originated, the origins of modern man. I think the scientific theory model pushes that more toward Africa, but that's the basic. You've got East Africa, the Middle East. It's a pretty close location here. It says number 4, humanity's origin dates back between 10,000 and 100,000 years. So they go way, way back, further than, say, the young Earth creation. Is the 6-day literal model pushes the age. And also they go further back than if you were to try to look at the genealogies in the Bible, like the King James Bible actually was printed with a time frame, which is not a valid thing. The printers consulted with scholars at that time, and they tried to make some kind of genealogy, and then from that genealogy in the Bible, trying to figure out time frames. And as we know now today, that method does not work because there are gaps in the genealogies. Only the more famous and popular names are mentioned in the genealogies. So you can't go to the genealogies alone and say, okay, I can calculate the actual time period of Adam and know exactly when he was formed and then work forward. No, you can't do that. It doesn't work that way. Number 5, the origin of the female lineage, Eve, predates the origin of the male lineage, Noah. And that's because of the bottleneck that they explained at the Great Flood, where Noah and his sons, all men trace their common ancestry back to Noah and his sons. But all women trace their ancestry all the way back to Eve because of the wives of Shem, Ham, and Japheth are diverse, and they're not all of the one family. So it allows it to go all the way back to Eve. God created humanity, number 6, at just the right time in Earth's history. Now, that's a really fascinating point because Hugh Ross has done a lot of explaining as to why the Earth is exactly the way it is. The sun is just the right distance away from the Earth, and we have just the right tilt, and the moon orbits the Earth at just the right speed, at just the right distance to allow for tides and different things to happen, and everything fits together like hand in glove, as if someone designed it all. Intelligent design. And in fact, as Christians, we believe that God is the author and creator of all. So it's all intelligently designed, and he's going to show that the history of humanity also was intelligently designed. Number 7, human culture appears and expands explosively in the archaeological records since humanity's origin. So that can be confirmed scientifically. You can see the spread of humanity from the geographical start point, which was in or around the vicinity of the Middle East. So you've got humanity going forth from that point. Not way over in North America someplace, not way over in South America someplace, not down in Australia, not down in the southern tip of Africa, not from Europe. It's all starting from where the Bible seems to be pointing it started. Number 8, humans share anatomical, physical, biological, and genetic similarities with extinct hominids, as well as great apes and other animals. So, we have similar DNA to chimps, great apes, different types of creatures, monkeys, orangutans, all kinds of primates, you might say. And the evolutionary biologists say, well, see, that shows that we have a common ancestor with the great apes, and we're all related. Well, no. Hugh Ross would say that shows a common design and a common template by the Creator used to create human beings. Number 9, humans are behaviorally distinct in ways that reflect God's image from the early hominids, the great apes, and other animals. So we are set apart and we are distinct from lower animals. These animals, like, for example, today, chimpanzees have a very similar DNA to humans, and humans have a very similar DNA to chimpanzees. But just because we have similar anatomical and physical and biological structures does not make us equal because, why? Because we share very, very important difference from them. The ones that are present today, chimpanzees, and even these hominids like Neanderthal and some of the others, we share a big difference, and that is God bestowed upon us the image of himself, the image of God. And that is characterized by higher intelligence, moral compass that we have within us, the capacity to look beyond our present situation, operating on planning and thinking and theorizing and reflecting instead of just acting under instinct. And these are all characteristics of God rather than animals. Number 10, a universal but local flood that impacted all humanity shaped human history. So the flood does play a big role in the development of human history. They don't go into that aspect so much in the book, but they wanted to put that in there because the universal flood created a bottleneck, like I said before, and that's why when you trace back the lineage, the males end with Noah and sons, and females go all the way back to Eve because of the diversity that Noah's Noah's sons' wives had, and they're able to go all the way back to Eve. Number 11, human lifespans once longer than 900 years old became progressively shorter after the flood. So the Bible talks about that God shortened the lifespans. And you can see that, and so there are reasons why that could happen. Humanity spread around the world from in or near the Middle East relatively recently. And then the last thing, the seeds of human civilization, agriculture, had their birth in or near the Middle East. So they are trying to take the scientific evidence and remove all of the naturalistic and materialistic assumptions of atheistic science and just look at it from a Christian perspective and say, hey, that fits in with this fits in with this. And God created Adam and Eve special. He did not create them from simply a continuation, an evolutionary process from these primates, that he made something unique and special and bestowed upon his creation, that he used the similar template from the lower primates, but he bestowed upon humans, Adam and Eve, his image, and that's what makes them distinct. And so they are unique and they are special in the place of God. So that's the beginning of a look at this. I'm going to try to get a hold of William Lane Craig's book that talks about the quest for the historical Adam. That one's going to come from, I believe, a more radical viewpoint. Even though I'm familiar with William Lane Craig, I took a class from him for one day when I was in seminary. I signed up for a class for him and decided to drop the class. It was a philosophy of science class at Trinity Seminary. And I had already taken a philosophy of science class at Wheaton College. So I decided, hey, I'm going to drop this. So he was my professor for one day. But I'm going to try to get a hold of his book, and then I'll review that also. So thanks for watching. We'll see you back next week. Keep thinking, keep reflecting, keep reading your Bibles. God bless.